Hey everyone and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be talking about an unorthodox approach to reducing deaths to ganks. Now the typical advice that you guys would have heard either within my videos or any other coach's videos is that these are the classic reasons you might be dying to ganks too many times, right? You're not warding, you're not leaning, you don't have any control over the waves, and your waves are in awkward positions. You don't really understand what the enemy jungler can do to you, the threat they impose onto you. Maybe you didn't understand or respect the amount of gank setup the opposing laner had. Or maybe you just stayed in lane with too limited resources. Or, maybe some other combination of reasons. The reality is that all of these are definitely viable, and these could very well be the case, the main reason why you're dying. But I feel like there's something even more fundamental. And one of the ideas that we're going to be exploring today is that these are kind of, if you kind of view it, in a bit of a, philosophical way, these are all behaviors, right? But what precedes behaviors is mindset. Mindset becomes or shapes your behavior inside of a game, right? And so moving on, the way I like to think about threat and reducing the likelihood of dying to ganks is I imagine threat on a scale. Okay, so when I'm heading into the game, this is exactly what I do in my own solo queue games. I always gauge roughly how much threat am I under in this game. So on the left-hand side, we're going to be in games where we're versing extremely low threat. Doesn't really matter what champion you're playing. If you're playing Victor, you're playing Akshan, you're playing Ahri, it doesn't matter. If I'm versing a Talia, Lilia, and a Nami, this is a very low threat combination of champions, isn't it? They can't do much early game. Lilia's not really going to be looking for some crazy ganks, and even if she does, at best, they can only blow a flash. Very low threat. On the other hand, I'm going to be against very high threat compositions. I'm going to be versing, this combination of champions here, LeBlanc, Rek'Sai, Pyke. It's an absolute nightmare. Again, doesn't matter if I'm playing Ahri, doesn't matter if I'm playing Victor. This is a very high threat combination. And just to really round it out, we're going to be versing champs with, mid threat. They're not super high threat, but not super low threat. The reason it's important to think about this is that this leaves room for nuance. It's not like you're in a game where you can do something or can't do something. It's always on a scale. Now, the reason I want to think about it like this is that this scale should shape your underlying mindset heading into the game. All right. Now you may ask, well, why? What is changing my mindset in terms of threat going to actually do? How's that going to change my behavior? Well, let's say this is the way I like to think about kind of my mind heading into a game. So imagine you have 100 mental points. Okay. Right. Just give it an arbitrary number. And this number here, 100, represents kind of the amount of focus you have. Okay. Now, because we are humans and we can't think of everything at once, we have to allocate this energy according to the situation we're in, right? In an ideal world, if we are a robot, we'd be able to simultaneously think about where everyone is on the map, be able to jungle track perfectly, be able to see us and trade perfectly, and our mental stack wouldn't be overwhelmed at all. But because we are, humans and we're very flawed, we can only allocate a certain amount of energy in certain places. So let's say we have 100 mental energy here. Let's say, for example, we are versing a very low threat composition, maybe that Talia, Lilia, Nami. Well, in that case, I could probably afford to direct 80 points towards actually just trading and winning the 1v1 and 20 points or 20% of my mental stack towards actually survival and looking at the minimap and warding and leaning. Now, vice versa, if I was versing maybe a high threat composition, maybe I'd only be able to put 20 points or 20% of my mental stack towards trading and 80% towards survival. Now, this is very, very important. So every game you're in, this percentage is going to change, right? This directly translates to literally how many times am I going to be looking at the minimap on average? Because people always ask me, Curtis, should I set a timer and should I look at the minimap X amount of seconds? Or how do you know when to look at the minimap or blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, well, look, the reality is that the amount of time that I'm looking at the minimap, the amount of energy I'm putting towards survival in general, whether that's the way I'm managing my waves, my warding, my leaning, how strict I am about all that stuff, literally is a direct correlation to how much threat I feel I'm under. So the skill we need to develop, again, ties back to what we were covering before, which is identifying how much threat we're actually under. Now, I know a lot of this can be quite theoretical, so let's actually go ahead and take a look at some examples to show what this actually looks like. So this is an example of a type of game that you guys might be in. So let's say you're the Lux here. If you're loading into this game and you see Echo, Camille, Lissandra, Amumu, and you have a Lilia, chances are you're not going to be able to allocate a metric ton of your energy towards actually just dominating the 1v1. Because if I do that, if I focus on winning trades in the 1v1 a lot, getting to, obsessing over my ability usage, trying to dominate my 1v1 matchup, even though that's theoretically possible, and this is a great 1v1 matchup. What's going to happen? Well, chances are I'm going to get sloppy on my jungle tracking, I'm going to get sloppy on my warding and leaning, and inevitably I will probably die to a gank. So this is one of those tricky scenarios where even though I am in a favorable 1v1, the game may not allow me to actually allocate enough energy, literally in focus, towards winning the trades and dominating my 1v1 because I'm just going to die, right? This is where League is a balance, balancing that mental stack of how much energy can I put into the lane while also not dying to ganks. And that is kind of the biggest challenges of playing mid lane, because you're in the middle of the map and everyone wants to kill you, especially if you're playing, it doesn't matter if you're playing an assassin or in a mobile mage, everyone wants to kill you, especially into these high threat champions. And conversely, you're going to be in games like this. Now we've got an Ahri game here into a Kayle, Briar, and Soraka, and a Fiora. Now in a game like this, I'm going to have a lot of freedom to dominate my 1v1 matchup. I know that I'm not going to be expecting as many roams from a Soraka or a Fiora. I know that even Kayle has very limited range, damage, and, gank setup. And Briar's ganks, they're not, super bad. They're not terrible. Not like a Shyvana, but nowhere near something like a Rek'Sai or a Lise or a Jarvan. So I know I'm going to have a lot more freedom, a lot more energy to direct into my 1v1. And this is what it's all about, guys. It's about kind of priming your mental stack, getting yourself in the right mindset so we know roughly how to kind of balance that mental stack appropriately. Now let's see this in action. This was actually from an Emerald 2 Victor versus Cho'Gath scenario. Now this Victor here was focusing all the attention on trying to bully here this Cho'Gath, trying to focus on, poking down with ease, kind of doing this slow build, poke under tower, doing all this stuff. And then what happens, Cho'Gath just walks up, Qs, Warwick comes through, and we die. Now, a lot of people would look at this from a perspective of maybe disrespecting Cho'Gath gank threat, maybe not really thinking about Warwick, poor warding and leaning, wave management, whatever. And yes, that is all there. I get that. I totally understand that. But the way I'm mentally viewing these scenarios is that stuff, all those little concepts that let's just call it X, let's just call these concepts, right? These concepts live below or above, if we draw kind of a pyramid here. These are like the middle rung of the pyramid. At the bottom is actually the underlying mindset in terms of how to balance or appropriately think about threat, right? That's at the bottom, and then obviously above that is the execution of such concepts, right? So you won't know what concepts into what ratio and when you need to be thinking of things and how much you should be considering things without actually priming your mental stack. And this is exactly what it looks like. And this client, this Victor player here, wasn't really thinking that he was in a high threat scenario, therefore he wasn't allocating as much energy towards warding, laning, and all that good stuff. So this is why you need to really be considering this heading into the game, and managing this mental stack is the aim of the game and the most effective tool you can actually have in your arsenal for reducing deaths to ganks. Now, there are some important caveats that we need to mention. The first one is that we must be always willing to adapt to changes inside the game. So let's say, for example, I have a Nidalee on my team and I'm versing a Rek'Sai. Now, in the scenario where Nidalee actually invades the Rek'Sai and wards the jungle, gets in Rek'Sai's face and everything, yippee, I'm happy, right? I'm not going to be getting ganked from Rek'Sai because I'm going to know where he is. He's under a lot of pressure from the Nidalee. And as a result, I actually maybe can allocate a lot more of my mental stack towards trading in the 1v1. I might have come in with this whole hypothesis that, oh my god, I'm playing Orianna into a Rek'Sai, I can get ganked really easily, therefore I need to focus so much attention on Rek'Sai's location. But if I know where he is and Nidalee's getting into his face all the time, my whole mental stack kind of balancing changes. What maybe would have been an 80-20 is now going to shift the other way completely. Maybe it's going to be the other way around, like 30-70. Excuse my writing. So you get the point. So we need to be willing to adapt to what is happening in front of us in the game. We cannot become stuck in our ways. Now, moving on. As we develop more muscle memory around our matchups due to ever-growing champ mastery, the more we can walk the tightrope more and more aggressively. So what does that mean exactly? Well, walking the tightrope, and kind of what our goal in every single lane is we want to, I guess, exert as maximum pressure as possible in the lane without dying to gank. So the way I view it is I literally view it like a tightrope, right? On one side of this rope, if you lean too far to the left, that means you're playing too aggressively and you're going to die to ganks. If you lean too far to the right and you're playing too defensively, you're going to miss opportunities and you're going to lose the game anyway. Our goal is to, again, maximize our output in the lane without dying to ganks. Now, we can do this in a more effective manner the more we understand matchups. And the reason this is the case is because it's not going to take up as much of our mental stack. So, going back before we talk about the 100 points of, I guess, you call them mental points, mental stack points, whatever. Let's say in order to play a particular matchup, it will require 30 of my mental stack points to actually win trades. Now, if I practice that matchup a lot, I played that matchup a lot, it might only take 15 of my mental stack points, such that I can allocate more energy to other areas, and such that I can actually be aggressive without dying more effectively. So this is why getting in the repetitions, understanding matchups, building that champ mastery will actually help you walk this tightrope more effectively. So, some of you guys to have a think about as well. Now, it also depends on the champion we play, right? You can head into this composition. You see the enemy composition, again, the Rek'Sai, let's say they have Ahri, Rek'Sai, Pyke or something. Well, if I'm playing Victor or Orianna, I'm going to be under a lot more threat than I would if I were playing Akshan or Zed or something like that, because I have mobility inbuilt inside of my kit, right? So, it's important that we, I guess, look at things through the lens of the champion we are playing. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that if we do not have flash, or we've had to burn our flash, that's obviously going to change the mental stack, allocation as well, right? Because flash is obviously a massive part of the way we manage, our threat assessment. So something to keep in mind. So to conclude this video, guys, it's always important to remember that the mindset we adopt shapes our decision making, and then comes execution, right? A lot of the time we get so, I guess, jacked up and so focused on the actual things like warding and leaning and all this stuff, we actually forget that the mindset precedes all of it. So hopefully this gives you something to think about. And for me, again, I use this on a day-to-day basis, not only with my clients, but in my own gameplay. I actually think this is the only way to reliably push your limit in the lane phase without kind of imploding and dying to a lot of ganks. If you have any questions about what I covered today, let me know inside the comments. Cheers.